Knesset and summoned his Likud partners one by one to announce their positions. The new right-wing and religious bloc will be made up of the Likud, Religious Zionism, Jewish Power, United Torah Judaism, Shas, and Noam parties. Some of the key positions for the new government: Benjamin Netanyahu as the Prime Minister, Amir Ohana as the Knesset Speaker, Itamar Ben-Gvir as the National Security Minister, Yoav Gallant as the Defense Minister, Aryeh Deri, the Interior and Health Minister, Yariv Levin, the Justice Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, the Finance Minister and Minister at the Defense Department, Yoav Kish, the Education Minister, and more. We'll hear from all the main players today, including Benjamin Netanyahu himself, outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who will now sit in the opposition, along with other key coalition partners. Let's head now to the Knesset, where I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman is standing by for us. Owen, good morning. The swearing in just 30 minutes away. What's the latest?
Well, the latest, Hamda, is we're now less than 30 minutes away from the swearing in, and we have no idea, or at least no definitive idea, on who this country's foreign minister is going to be. And, of course, Israel is not a Caribbean island or a Pacific island. This is a country with big foreign policy challenges, and yet we don't know who the foreign minister is going to be, because, presumably, of infighting inside the Likud party and dissension in the ranks and unhappiness, reportedly, on the part of Israel Katz, whom Netanyahu, a senior Likud politician whom Netanyahu had reportedly slated to be second in a rotation for the position, only going in 2 years. Of course, who knows if this government is still going to be in office in 2 years or what's going to happen, so he's unhappy about that. But at any rate, a little bit of suspense, and again, not uninteresting, I suspect, to people outside the country, that we're less than a half an hour from the swearing in, and we don't know who the foreign minister is going to be. And maybe, Hamda, we won't know until it is read from the Knesset podium, because in a half an hour at 11 o'clock local time, it all gets started, right? There's already the buzz in the building of the media here and the politicians and members of parliament starting to arrive. But at 11 o'clock it starts. The president, Isaac Herzog, is welcomed into the plenum, and then the principles, the founding principles of the government are read out, and that list of ministers, and then the speeches begin, first by incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, then by the incoming leader of the opposition, Yair Lapid, and then on down through all of the factions over a number of hours before the election of the new parliament speaker, Amir Ohana, the candidate being put forward by the emerging coalition, then of course the vote itself to seat the government, and the swearing in. So obviously a very busy day here at the Israeli parliament with a lot of buzz. Obviously, Hamda, once you get past the 11 o'clock hour, it's ceremonial. Of course, very, very important, an important milestone for this country, a government that has been proven to be very controversial over the weeks of its formation in many quarters in Israeli society. And of course, the personal story of Benjamin Netanyahu. He's coming back, not for the first time, but for the second time, a feat that's fairly rare in democracies. And yes, we will see him later on this afternoon local time, when people are starting to wake up in the United States, go to the podium in the Israeli parliament, take that oath of office as prime minister, Netanyahu forming his sixth government, Hamda, and maybe his most controversial.
And Owen, the transfer of power ceremony, where we understand that Benjamin Netanyahu will not hold the traditional ceremony handing over the premiership with Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Talk to us about this ceremonial event and why both of them actually chose not to move forward with it.
Well, listen, again, it's remarkable, Hamda. You're absolutely right. Each of them, reportedly, has said he doesn't want to move forward with the ceremony. We should also say that in the swearing in of the previous government, the government led by Naftali Bennett and then Yair Lapid, the ceremony also was not held. So this isn't necessarily a precedent. This isn't the first time. But you're right. Throughout decades of Israeli history, this is something that was done. And I think it is rather sad that we won't see the outgoing prime minister hand over the torch in a ceremony to the incoming prime minister as a show of continuity and as a show of respect from one to the other. But you're right, it will be something that's very much missing from the day's ceremony and from the day's events. And for all of the speeches and all of the talk, I think it is something that people will feel is missing. But again, Hamda, reportedly neither side wanted it, and that itself is telling.
Owen Alterman will be sure to check back in with you as the events develop. Thank you. Let's bring in our panel now. Ruth Wasserman-Lande, the former Knesset member, and Arya Kahana, diplomatic correspondent at Israel Hayom, both joining me live in studio. Ruth, I'll start with you first. Benjamin Netanyahu, the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history, now swearing in the most right-wing government in the country's history. What is he hoping to accomplish this time around?
Well, There's the declarative part of what he's hoping to accomplish, and there is the underlying message which I believe also stands behind his objectives and goal setting. And I would dare say that there are issues pertaining to his own agenda that are necessarily driving him. Perhaps this is one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the main reasons why he would create such a coalition. Others would differ and say that perhaps the lack of other partners that would allow him to move forward with his own objectives. But there's definitely an issue of the personal objectives, which I personally cannot take off the table. And there's the declarative agenda, which is quite worrying, in my humble opinion, regarding the issues of personal rights of different sectors of society, issues pertaining, and here I dare say this is correct and very important to deal with, the internal security of Israel and the fact that this has deteriorated over the last decade and needs to be taken care of. And issues also pertaining to religious and state connections, which has been an issue that many of the incoming ministers have spoken about and have a close relationship to.
Ariel, I want to get your take. Bezalel Smotrich writing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. You mentioned rights, civil liberties that a number of critics think will be stripped away from a lot of people. He writes, for example, arranging a small number of sex-separated beaches and proposing scarcely limits to the choices of the majority of the Israelis who prefer mixed beaches. And he's saying that along with this type of situation and others, he simply wants to offer an option to the others, guaranteeing religious believers aren't punished by the government for their beliefs. What's your take on that?
So if I may say, Hamda, first and foremost, it's good to see you face-to-face and not through Zoom. But maybe before we jump into Smotrich's agenda, I think it's important to say that after 4 years, 5 elections, 2 not stable governments, at last we're going to see probably a stable government in Israel, probably holds for a few years, with more or less the same agenda of the parties. I think, at least from this aspect, it's positive. I think there are a lot of people in Israel that are happy today with this result. And now, of course, the government has a lot of goals. There's a lot of things to do and to improve, because there was a reason why they were elected. First and foremost, the personal security that people wants to feel in the streets. Now, going to your question, look, I think all this debate, all this discussion about the rights of the minorities and the LGBT communities and so on, it is mostly, I would say, politicized discussion. The current government maybe will change the way it combines the rights of minorities, of the religious minority and the LGBT community, but it will not avoid rights from this community, from the LGBT community. And I think all the discussion was just portrayed not in the right way. Now, what Smotrich is saying, for example, and I can tell you, I'm a religious person myself. And by the way, it relates to me as a Jewish religion person, but as well for Muslims in Israel. If you want to go today to the beach, that we see behind you here in Tel Aviv, it's very not comfortable for me, because I want to, I have my limitations and I have no place to go. So I think it's positive by the government that says, yeah, we have a lot of voters who are religious. We want to help them. I think it's fine. And so on with the other issues you mentioned in the article, maybe later we'll go into it, but more or less the issue is rights for everyone and not for one side.
I'd love to comment on that if possible.
We'll get your comment right after the break. More from Israel's government swearing-in ceremony. Keep it right here on I-24 News. We'll be right back.
On the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem. breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy, giving you key context, not just headlines. With the stories from Israel that touch the U.S. and those across the region with impact far beyond its borders. Sunday to Thursday on I-24 News. Catch the rundown, where the Middle East meets the world.
The Middle East. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I-24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I-24 News, see beyond.
Welcome back to this special edition from the I-24 News Desk. Benjamin Netanyahu coming back into power in the government swearing-in ceremony just a few minutes away. Yesterday, presenting his coalition agreements to the parliament and summoning members of his own party to announce their new positions. The incoming right-wing and religious bloc to be made up of the Likud, Religious Zionism, Jewish Power, United Torah Judaism, Shas, and Noam parties. And we'll be sure to bring you all of the live events and speeches. We'll be sure to hear from all the key players today, including Benjamin Netanyahu himself. Let's bring back in our panel, Ruth Wasserman-Lande and Ariel Kahana. Ruth, you wanted to comment on some of the things we were discussing before the break when it comes to some of the things the new coalition wants to, they say, fix within Israeli society.
So the issue of personal rights or personal liberties, as we had formerly said, there are different kinds of personal liberties. For example, separate beaches do in fact serve religious people who want to tan in a separate beach with women only or men only. These specific times that could be separated for the modesty, for the well-being of those religious people, doesn't seem to me as taking the liberty of somebody else. But there are different issues pertaining to giving services to people who are gay or homosexual or belonging to the LGBTQ society, and to other people who may be of the minority, of other beliefs. And this is something that cannot be explained in any way that can make me or other people in the country feel comfortable. And that is the comment that I wanted to make. There's a difference between the personal liberties in the different respects.
So
we will be sure to discuss.
One sentence, no
Yes.
rights will be taken. It will be shaping in a new way the balance between rights.
We'll be sure to discuss the discrimination law and all of the proposals by the Religious Zionism Party. But now we're going to cross to our very own Alec Pollard, live outside the Israeli parliament. Alec, good morning. We're expecting a lot of protests, specifically from the LGBTQ community. I can see a group behind you already. What's the latest?
Right, Hamda, they are certainly here in numbers, but it's not just them. There were also calls from the parties that are now in the opposition, led by Yesh Atid and others, to bring people out here en masse from all across the opposition spectrum and all the various groups, including many civil society groups, not just the LGBT groups that are here. In the thousands, they are expected. Already we have a large group of people here and more to come. Colorful protesters with many signs and many forms of protest. And one of them is over here. I think it speaks for itself. So, my friend, what do you have to say about this incoming government, and why did you choose this form of protest in order to have your say?
All right, thank you. I have to say that this is the most racist government that the state of Israel has ever seen. This is a government with a very clear agenda of managing the country according to the laws of the Bible and not the laws of a modern civilian society of 2023. This is a government that is about discrimination and about changing the type of system that we have from democracy to something that is more like a dictatorship. And this is why I'm here, and this is a symbol of where we are heading to as a country.
But is the Kim Jong-un and North Korea analogy the correct analogy here? But some of the things that you talked about, for instance, racism, is this the right way to form the protest? Do you think this is going to land and speak to the people, so to speak, in this form?
The issue is not North Korea, all right? The North Korea, they don't have 3 million Palestinian people that they need to deal with one way or another. So obviously Israel is far from facing the situations that North Korea faces, but it's a concept. It could be North Korea, it could be Erdogan in Turkey, it could be the modern democracy of Iran, and it could be Poland or Hungary or any other country in the world. It's a symbol. It's a very simple, clear message where we are heading.
All right, Chagai, thank you very much. So you heard that message over there, and there are many more people here, believe me, who will have their say until the day is out. The swearing-in ceremony today in Parliament, but outside Parliament, a lot happening as well.
Alec Pollard live for us outside the Knesset building. We'll be sure to bring you back in as that protest develops. Let's bring back in our panel. Ariel, I want you to comment on what you just saw, a colorful protest. He said there are people there in the thousands, the opposition parties calling on their supporters to come and protest outside. You heard this protester himself saying the government is racist. What are your thoughts?
So it's a political demonstration. I mean, as you said, it's opposition who organized it. Now, let's go to the discrimination issue and whether a person will have or will not be forced to give services to everyone. What's going on today, I think, is a kind of absurd. Because today, for example, if a Muslim owner he is the owner of an industry of papers, of science. Okay, that's his job. Today, he will be forced by court to print signs that are calling Jews to go and visit the Temple Mount against trans religions. That's the current legal situation today. What the new government wants to do is to give more freedom to everyone according to their religion. So in this way, a Muslim person would not be forced, for example, to call other people to become Christian, because that is going against his beliefs. Right, so that's the purpose of the change they're gonna do. And once again, I'm telling you that after I spoke in a quite long conversation with Knesset member Simcha Rotman, he is the one who's gonna make the change, and he guaranteed me that all rights for all groups will be maintained. And I think that's why I said in the beginning that there is misperceptions of the discussion, again, from political reasons. But once again, as Smotrich wrote in the article he quoted, all rights, I'm telling you, all rights will be kept for all groups.
I would like to push back on you a little bit, and then Ruth, I want to bring you into the discussion. This discrimination law debate happened when Oli Stroke went on the public broadcaster in Israel and said that doctors should actually have the option to refuse to provide medical treatments to members from the LGBTQ community, to people who, if it's against their religious beliefs, as long as there's another doctor who can provide that same service. What do you think about that? She did come out and say that she didn't mean it in a discriminatory way, but rather if it went against that doctor's personal religious beliefs and there was someone else who could provide that service, that it would be okay. What do you think about that?
Personally, I know MK Simcha Rotman and I know MK Orit Struk, and I respect them on the personal level. I think that the declaration made by both of them recently is very, very problematic. And the reason for that is that words have power. Who more than us, the Jewish people throughout the world, know that everything, especially bigotry and hatred, begins with words, and they have a lot of power. they seep down into the conversation levels and the hearts of the young people and the youth, and they have a power to influence and impact our opinions. And I feel that speaking about being able to give services, not able to give services, preventing services from certain people, be they what may, besides going absolutely against the oath, the medical oath that is being taken by any doctor, don't forget that in this country, medical doctors, Jewish medical doctors, treat people who tried to commit and committed suicide attacks or terrorist attacks against Jews, against civilians, and they are still given medical treatment. This is the basis of humanism, and this is a basis that has been adopted by the Declaration of Independence of the state. By the way, I want to say another word about the demonstration and the demonstrator dressed as the leader of North Korea. In North Korea, no demonstration like this could have actually happened at all in any way. One cannot even breathe a word against the government, and therefore this is not the event, the atmosphere, the ambience of that country, and cannot be compared. We do not want it to even come near or to go towards any kind of a comparison, and that is why conversation and words cannot be said and declared as well.
So let me make two points about that, please. First and foremost, I agree with words that what Rothman and Struk said was not successful, and I think they know that, and that's the reason both of them actually fixed it or tried to fix it. But secondly, if you go to the legal conditions that there is today, what Orit Struk said is by law. Today, if a doctor, Muslim, Jews, Christian, whatever, from religious reasons doesn't want to do an action that somebody else can do, he's not obligated to do that. That's a current legal situation
today.
Can
give the medical service. You are absolutely right. But there's a difference.
That's what she said.
There's a difference in augmenting it in the legal or the legislation of a country than in the practice that everybody understands, and it happens, again, provided that medical service can be given if needed. And I remind everybody once more, the terrorists are even given medical treatment because this is the basis of humanism.
Nobody disagree about that. Again, I think what she said was not that successful, was not that smart.
Was completely unsuccessful and a tad more than unsmart, if I may.
But again, if we go to the facts, that's why I'm saying all this discussion is so much politicized. Because if we go to the facts, to the current legal condition is of what she said, that's what's going on today, right? So
I want to ask you, Ariel, do you think that these types of statements from these lawmakers in the incoming government can now open the door to discrimination against religious people in the Orthodox community who perhaps want these changes?
So what I see is kind of a reaction by the, let's say, extreme secular side, extreme anti-Haredi, anti-Jewish Orthodox side. You could even see in last days attacks, even physical attacks against Orthodox Jews somewhere around Israel. So no doubt the discussion in Israel is too much heated, and that's a result. That's why everyone should calm down. Everyone should not make
beginning from the leadership and the government.
I definitely. The leadership is the first to be responsible. I agree with that, and everybody has to calm down, but the opposition as well.
But I want to just mention another thing. The private sector in Israel, including banks and other very large corporations, have come out and said we will not cooperate with this kind of legislation and or rhetoric and or system in any way. We will not give credit to those who go forward and lean towards that kind of practice. And not only banks, but also other practices and other big chains have come out and said this. And this perhaps is the show of not only the opposition or the politicized position, as you had mentioned, but the vibe, the ambience, the atmosphere that characterizes the civil society in Israel, which is very strong.
I want to talk about now Israel's image on the global stage. A lot of analysts and experts are saying that the image of Israel's government, the image of Israel being a democracy in this region has now been tainted because of this incoming government. Now, more than 100 former Israeli Israeli diplomats and ambassadors writing a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu saying, quote, they're expressing profound concern at the serious damage to Israel's foreign relations, its international standing, and its core interests about emanating from what will be the policy of the incoming government. What can we expect from countries like the United States, from regional allies, as well as allies from the West?
In my humble opinion, Israel should be a fortress of righteousness. Should we expect more from ourselves than from anyone else? Yes, I believe that we should. Does Judaism incorporate in and within itself the issue or the concept of tikkun olam, making the world a better place, being a lighthouse of values? In my humble opinion, yes. And this is how I perceive my country, my people, and the fact that it is also an example and should set an example to the Jewish peoplehood and the world in general. Can we always be perfect? Of course not. Is there any other country that's perfect? With all respect to the hypocrisy always shown by the international arena and its huge criticism towards Israel, no matter what we do, I have my opinions about that as well. But should we give a reason to even question the morality or the equality or the encompassed values that we have in Israel and we have served as a beacon of light in the region without a doubt for decades since the establishment of the country? No.
What do you think? Countries like Jordan are coming out and saying that should the status quo be changed at the holy sites in East Jerusalem, that they would have to respond. They also said previously, about a month ago, should Itamar Ben-Gvir come and walk on the Temple Mount as a minister, they would see it a lot differently. What do you think about regional allies wanting to either sever ties or be involved in escalations with Israel because of this new government?
If I may, I want to reply about the West, because I think it's even more important than Jordan. Look, you know, when Menachem Begin became, for the first time, Prime Minister in 1977, the left side in Israel and in the world as well said, oh, Israelis will no more be a democracy because Begin is a fascist. The outcome was a peace agreement with Egypt. Now, so they say time after time after time when right-wing governments are being elected here in Israel, Israel is a democracy. It will always be a very strong democracy. No one is questioning, including not Ben-Gvir or Smotrich or Struk. None of them is questioning Israel as a democracy, and I would say even as a progress democracy. The question is just about balance between rights. That's the issue.
I beg to differ.
All right. The way I see it, at least, is that for decades, the right wing in Israel, including Smotrich or Struk and all those guys, the settlers, what we call, didn't get their day in explaining what is their worldview. And that's the reason you could see in the Western media, definitely since the elections ended, this portrayed of them as extreme, as anti-democracy, as anti-rights, and so on. I know them for many years, and I know their opinions. It's not their opinions, right? So it's an international campaign. It definitely will be hard for the next government to deal with it. I'm sure that's what Netanyahu will try to. Actually, he's doing it because we see him on a weekly, even daily basis, giving interviews to the media, at least in the United States. So there is a challenge over here. But again, it's a lot of it. I would say maybe for the first time, a lot of it is politicized here in Israel, because comparing. I mean, I can remember when Netanyahu was elected in 2009. Since then, the left in Israel, Haaretz newspaper, for example, is comparing him for Hitler. North Korea and China are combined together.
I'm completely against that.
Okay,
That's
but
terrible.
it's not only terrible, it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous and terrible.
Okay, and we see it now
Doesn't
again.
make anything
I'm
right.
telling you, as nothing happened, nothing will happen, right? Israel will be a democracy forever, and I can guarantee you another thing today. No one is going to invade the Knesset like happened in the United States, right? So, again, let's calm down. Let's see everything is the right perception. Everything was okay and everything will be okay. I can do that for sure. If you want one word about Jordan, so the way I see it, the king is, he has internal challenges for a very big Palestinian population. He's not the best king. He's not the popular king in Jordan. Okay, let's go to the...
We're looking at some live images now at the Knesset, and we're going to bring in our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman, who's live for us there. Owen, what is the latest? We've been having a healthy debate and discussion here from both sides in the studio, but what's going on where you are?
Well, listen, Hamda, you can imagine the buzz, right? Just moments before the swearing-in starts, people are walking through. President Herzog passed a moment ago. Prime Minister Lapid, we're expecting maybe incoming Prime Minister Netanyahu to walk by a moment from now. There's a group walking by behind me. You can see Yoav Gallant, the incoming defense minister who just passed. So obviously you can see the buzz and you can feel it in the air. Of course, there's still suspense. We are having members of parliament walking into the plenum. Hamda, I remind you, we still do not know who the foreign minister of this country is going to be. We may well hear it for the first time from that Knesset podium. It's rather remarkable. And as for the debate you're having in the studio, listen, it's going to be continuing in the plenum behind me, right? Benjamin Netanyahu is going to take to the podium just a few moments from now, present the government's principles, present that list of ministers, and obviously in so doing, try to defend what his government is planning on doing. You'll have Yair Lapid then answer and be able to have the first right of response, then on through all of the different factions in the parliament over the course of a number of hours, taking one at a time to go to the podium and to speak to these issues and have this debate in a formal setting in the plenum. Obviously, Hamda, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Big tests lie ahead for this government in trying to balance between the need to give voice to the right-wing impulses that brought this government to power and that animates so many of its politicians, with the need to have some connection with more mainstream parts of Israeli public opinion, with important institutions in this country, and of course with important institutions abroad and those foreign governments who are very interested in what's going on here.
I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman live for us at the Knesset. We'll be sure to check back in with you as all of the events are beginning. Let's bring back in our panel. Let's talk about some of the positions that Netanyahu has handed out. Yoav Gallant will become the next defense minister. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister. Aryeh Deri, the interior and health minister. Bezalel Smotrich, finance minister and a minister at the defense ministry. And well, can you break down for us what it would mean for someone like Bezalel Smotrich to have this type of appointment? And also talk to us about if you are surprised by any of these appointments or if they were expected.
So I think most of the appointments in the Likud party are good. Gallant, he was a general in the army, so it's very good to appoint him as a defense minister. I think other appointments like Yoav Kish to the diaspora is very good. The same with Miri Regev, who was already transportation minister, and now will
become the minister of diaspora. My apologies.
Sorry, my mistake. My mistake. Amichai Shikli will go to the diaspora ministry. Thank you very much for that. Yoav Kish for education, by the way, that's another good appointment.
A certain part of the education ministry, which has been sort of separated into several parts.
So, yeah, once again, it's a campaign. He will be in charge of the education ministry. It's not the first time others are involved. There used to be always deputy ministers, but we touched that already. In any case, about Smotrich, I think it's very interesting. He was a minister for transportation and for a very short time, and that's why while there is a challenge in the economy in Israel and in the world as well. He's very young, he's very talented. But I want to see that he will really be able to do this very complicated job. He has Netanyahu. The real finance minister is going to be, as always, Netanyahu. But for Smotrich, it will definitely be quite tough.
And Ruth, your thoughts on these appointments? As our senior correspondent Owen Alterman noted, we do not know who the foreign minister will be. This is a country with very intense international relations, a country that has normalized ties with Arab states that were formerly seen as enemies, and a country that's working toward normalizing ties even with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So how do you feel about these appointments?
I feel that the widening or the potential widening of the Abraham Accords are definitely a prime ministerial sort of portfolio and will not be taken by any foreign minister, be he or she who may. Netanyahu is known to make decisions in the very, very, very last second. He's definitely taking it to the extreme this time and making us all nervous, but I believe that he will make an appointment, and a right appointment. I agree with you, Ariel, concerning the majority of the appointments on the Likud side. I think that Smotrich is a very capable potential minister. He has a very, very strong right perception of economy, perhaps a little bit less suited to the Israeli, more socially oriented economy and needs, which could be a problem, a kind of an oxymoron in and within itself. So this may be the problem.
The union organization already says they're going to fight him.
Right. So this is the issue that I perceive would be problematic rather than his ideology, because in the economic aspect, this worries me a little bit less. But left-right economic issues will come into play. Other ministers worry me a little bit. For example, Idit Silman in the issue of environmental affairs, which are less her portfolio, less in terms of experience, and again, with all respect to her as a member of Knesset, in terms of experience being a very critical and key issues, particularly now and particularly vis-a-vis the international arena, differently from the political arena. I think that it is a bit of a politicized appointment, not that we don't know,
for sure.
Not that we don't know such appointments in the past, and of course this is not only characterizing this government, but every single government, but it is a more problematic
it brings
appointment.
me to say, going back to the big discussion we made before, brings me to say we always have to remember that if the Haredim were agree to cooperate with Lapid and Lieberman, they would get from Lieberman and Lapid all what they got from Netanyahu. We always have to remember that, because we were in the same junction a year and a half ago.
There is, and
right?
I agree with you, an inherent issue within Israeli political arena, and that is the coalition system, having each small party. I mean, look at Noam as a perfect example, a one-man political show, pulling and pushing and tugging a political leader like Netanyahu to absolutely, pardon me, but obscene issues that Netanyahu cannot possibly agree with. And I'm sure that if he had 1 minute to speak with me, he would even admit it. But being within the coalition system that we are in, this is the inherent problem, and we should aim in a utopic world to change that. Had we been able to do that? Unfortunately not.
So there is no perfect democracy, but it's better than other ways.
A democracy
right?
is inherently imperfect.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the political instability that you both mentioned. There has been political instability in Israel for the last few years now. There have been quite a few number of elections that the Israeli public has been, quite frankly, suffering through.
Absolutely.
Do you think this government is going to be able to keep it together for 4 years, or will the differences from within the party itself tear it apart?
Well, I think we differ on that as well. It's not surprising, but I think you said before that it will be a very stable government. I am at a minority opinion here, not only with you, but generally with people. I believe it will not hold, because I believe and I respect the Likud and the majority of its members of Knesset. I believe that Netanyahu, as a statesman rather than a politician, has the clout and the experience to understand the repercussions of certain of the things that he's going to do with that kind of coalition, and therefore he will face a lot of problems from within that he will be troubled with. So
I agree, he will face a lot of problems. By the way, from inside the Likud as well, while we talk about ministers who were not appointed yet, about the foreign ministry and others, it's because there is, it's not a rebel yet in the Likud, but definitely it's problems inside there. But I think the government will hold, and I want to say that the new ministers, especially from the right-wing governments, or like Goldknop from the Haredi leader, they are all inexperienced. Many of the declarations of the statesmen we discussed before are coming from just not enough experience of those people. They're, I would say, becoming adults, right? They're becoming moderate. Some of them, like Ben-Gvir, they're going through a process.
Moderate?
Yeah. Compare Ben-Gvir of today to even a half year ago, right? And not mentioning 15 years ago. So he's becoming more moderate to what he used to be. And they understand better the responsibility of being ministers. And I am sure, like happened to many others before them, when they will sit in the security cabinet meetings and see what do they face, they will all, again, calm down at least a little bit. They will have to do their politics, of course, but the responsibility, let's say, make people a little bit older and more responsible, and therefore I believe that although, of course, there are always difficulties, it's politics, but all along, I believe they will hold on at least 3 years.
Let's talk about Itamar Ben-Gvir for a second. A bill passing yesterday granting him more rights over the police. What do you think that will look like within the greater Israeli society, as well as parts of East Jerusalem and the West Bank?
So I think inherently it calls for very close follow-up on what that actually means on the ground. In many countries, the Minister of Internal Security has authority over the police, but decisions made on movement of regiments or more operative-oriented steps within the police are necessarily, professionally, left to those who are of expert opinion and expert experience in the police force itself. And this can prove as somewhat of a problematic issue. I do believe that the internal security arena has been left untouched. It has reached unparalleled strife in the sense that people do not feel safe anymore. Neither in the Arab sector within Israel. For several years there have been murders, illegal weapons running around the Arab sector. Absolute insanity has characterized the internal security arena in Israel, and it needs to be taken care of.
We're looking at live images now in the Knesset of incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arriving now, shaking hands with some of his coalition partners in a congratulatory manner. Ariel, I want to get your take here. We're going to start very soon, but what is your take on the opposition? Why didn't Yair Lapid and his party, if they were so against this right-wing and religious bloc, why didn't they come and sit with Netanyahu and say, you know what? To avoid this a worst-case scenario for us, we will sit with you in order to make the government a little bit more moderate with you as the leader. Why was that not an option?
So I would say it's the biggest mistake Lapid did, but it's also the biggest success Lapid did, because the campaign that he led since the elections was very successful from his point of view, because instead that his voters will come and ask him, how did you fail in the elections? You were the prime minister and you lost your office. How did you do that? You have to go home. None of them is saying it because he is successfully, and with the help of the right-wing parties from Netanyahu's side, he could arrange this campaign. But going back to the broad picture for years, it was a huge mistake by Lapid and by the center to boycott Netanyahu. That's the reason for the 5 elections we had. That's the reason Lapid and Gantz and Sarah and all the others are gonna be in the opposition. So for now, they're going to go for the opposition. I believe that maybe in a year, maybe in a half year, it depends on the security challenges as well. Gantz, maybe some of Gantz's party, maybe will join the government, but it will not happen now. In any case, Netanyahu will not leave his partners from the right wing, because his destiny, his political destiny, depends on Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and Goldknopf and Avi Maoz.
We're going to cross now to I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman live for us in the Israeli Parliament building in Jerusalem. Owen, the incoming Prime Minister arriving to the plenum. What is the latest?
Well, the latest, Hamda, again, he's arriving, the politicians are arriving. One very quick update, and then we have a guest with us. The update is Danny Danon, a senior Likud politician, walked by. We grabbed him for a quick interview. Hamda, this is a former Israeli ambassador to the UN, a senior Likud politician. And we asked him, are you going to be a minister in the government? He said no. He said he's still in talks. We asked him which ministry. He said he won't negotiate on camera. But the episode just shows how much last-minute drama there is in the run-up to this government. As of this moment, we still don't really know who's going to be the country's foreign minister. And again, they're entering the plenum. We're going to have to wait for it literally to be read from the podium. But at any rate, more importantly, we have a guest with us, Sharena Skel from the National Unity Party. Thank you so much for being with us. Your thoughts as you're about to walk into that plenum for the swearing-in of this government.
Well, I'm really disappointed, and to be honest, I'm quite worried. I'm quite worried because Netanyahu is being sworn to be prime minister as a very weak prime minister. The other party has a lot of power over him. For the last 2 years, there's been elections after elections. He's been distributing checks to all of these members, to all of these parties, saying, don't go with anyone else, boycott any other prime minister, say, I'm going to only be the prime minister. And now he needs to pay for the checks he distributed. And
we're going to have to stop you right there. Incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu taking the podium at the plenum. Now let's listen in.
Distinguished President Yitzhak Herzog and his wife Michal, the President of the Supreme Court, Justice Esther Chayut. I don't see if David Chayut is here. Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana, and his partner, Amir Haddad, Knesset members, and especially my good friends, the head of the factions of the new coalition who have worked so well in cooperation with us, ministers of the designated government, my fellow citizens. The new government is setting out on its journey today in the middle of Israel's 75th year. This is an important milestone.
קריאה ראשונה, חבר הכנסת שירי. אני רוצה שתהיו בשקט. מה כבר ביקשתי? שתהיו בשקט כשנזר שהוא נואם? בבקשה. נאור שירי, קריאה שנייה.
The Speaker is calling upon the members of the Knesset to keep silent, calling some members by name before they are forcibly ejected. The new government is setting out on its journey today in the middle of Israel's 75th year. In the first 25 years of the state, the foundations were set in all areas. We absorbed a huge amount of immigration, and we fought difficult wars forced upon us by our enemies. In the next 25 years, we saw a foundational and pivotal political upheaval, and we signed peace agreements with previous enemies. In the next 25 years, we accelerated the transition to a free economy, and I am proud of the privilege I had to lead reforms in this area. We made Israel a technological and innovational powerhouse, and we signed 4 historic peace agreements with Arab countries. We now look forward to the next 25 years, which will bring us to Israel's centenary. In the next 4 years, we'll work so that when we celebrate Israel's 100th anniversary, Israel will be a world powerhouse that flourishes and is strong, whose existence will no longer be cast in doubt. For that reason, we must carry out 3 important tasks. The first to frustrate Iran's ability to develop a nuclear arsenal that will threaten us and the entire world.
חברי הכנסת, בבקשה. חבר הכנסת גם לנו יש גבולות, אי אפשר לבוא לפה ולשמוע את השקרים האלה. פעם אחרונה שאני משיב, אתה בקריאה שנייה. אתה לא תקרא לנו לדבר כאן שהצבעת.
The opposition members are calling out weak in unison. We will ensure Israel's military superiority by continual strengthening. The first task is to make sure that Iran does not destroy us with an atom bomb. And you are taking that lightly, as if that is a small thing. Thank you very much. The members of the new coalition are applauding. You who supported the nuclear agreement, why don't you listen? You may learn something. Who are you to mock us? What are you talking about? The second task is to develop Israel's infrastructures, including, and listen well, you may laugh, but remember what I am saying today, to develop a bullet train that will travel hundreds of kilometers an hour, that will connect the country from the very north to the very south. We want to do away with the periphery and cause every area of Israel to flourish. The third task is to continue to expand the circle of peace with Arab countries in order to put an end to the Israeli-Arab conflict. These are the three meta goals of our country and our government, and we will not make do with that. The new government will also address other crucial areas to restore quiet and personal security and governability to the state of Israel. We are determined to address the cost of living and the price of housing and to improve the education system for all of Israel's children. We are determined to improve Israel's education system for all of Israel's children, Jews and Arabs, religious and secular, without any exception. Knesset members, I don't need to hear your shouts in order to know that there are among us some disagreements, but there is a broad agreement between us among these tasks that face us, although not for all. I hear the cries of the opposition about the end of democracy, the end of the state. Losing an election is not the end of democracy. It is the essence of democracy. A democratic government is tested, a democratic state is tested, first of all, by the willingness of the losing side to accept the decision of the majority. In an enlightened democracy, the rules of the game are respected. We saw this in another context in the World Cup. The French fans were disappointed, but they accepted the outcome. And they even applauded the Argentinian team. I know that you won't applaud me, but I do expect you to respect the decision of the electorate and stop calling for rebellion against the government. In a democracy, you don't climb over the fence of the parliament or the capital and try to break into the Knesset.
בבקשה להוציא אותה. בחיים במחוק על כפיים. בושה. כשמפסידים, גלעד קריב קריאה ראשונה. כשמפסידים לא אומרים.
When you lose, you don't say you have to attack the people, you have to respect the people. I am proud of everything we have achieved until now. The peace agreements, the gas we have taken out of the sea that has turned Israel into an energy powerhouse, our victory over COVID, and many, many other achievements. I am proud that we worked together and that we passed this golden age of Israel. And that's exactly what we continue to do for the benefit of all Israel's citizens without any exception. And now,
עכשיו אני מבקש מכל חברי הכנסת להפסיק עם הכפיים. איפה אני ארגיש כמו מסי?
the speaker asked the Knesset members to stop applauding. I'm going to start feeling like Messi, says the Prime Minister. I hope you'll allow me to say a few words that come from the heart. This is the sixth time. This is the sixth time.
חברי הכנסת, חברות הכנסת,
This is the sixth time that I am presenting a government headed by me and to ask for the confidence of the Knesset. And I am moved as much as the first time. The sense of mission to ensure the security and future of our state, I draw from the heritage of my grandfather, Rabbi Natan Milikovsky Netanyahu, from my parents of blessed memory, Tzila and Professor Ben-Zion Netanyahu, from my brother Yoni, who fell in Entebbe. The strength to lead I received from you, millions of Israeli citizens who share our path and vision, and first and foremost from my dear and beloved family, from my wife Sarah, who is here today and who is always at my side, and from my sons Yair and Avner, who are always at my side, and from you, my dear ones. This is another opportunity to say thank you. You are the strength of my life, and I love you very, very much. Netanyahu is making the Shechayanu prayer, the blessing.
Amen. חברי הכנסת, הוא חייב למצוא את הרכב הממשלה.
You just heard from incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there addressing his coalition partners as well as the opposition. A fiery exchange between the opposition, some members even removed from the Knesset. Benjamin Netanyahu highlighting the last 75 years of Israel and says he looks forward to the next 25 in the centennial, but specifically looking forward to the next 4 in which he and his incoming government will rule. Now, he also was talking about a 3-point plan to diminish Iran's nuclear capabilities. Number 1, developing the incoming prime minister is now speaking again. Let's take a listen.
חברות וחברי הכנסת,
Knesset members,
אני מתכבד להציג
I am
בפניכם
honored to present
את
to
הרכבה של
you
ממשלת ישראל ה-37
the 37th Israeli government in alphabetical order. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
משרד ירושלים ומורשת ישנה שמו למשרד
The
מורשת.
Minister of Jerusalem Heritage will be the Minister of Heritage, and Rabbi Amichai Eliyahu will be the Minister. The
חבר
Minister
הכנסת אופיר אקוניס.
of Technology and Innovation and Science, Ophir Okones. Chaim
השר לביטחון פנים שישונה תוארו לשר
Minister
לביטחון
in the
לאומי.
Education Ministry, Minister of National Security.
חבר הכנסת מיקי לוי, כיושב ראש לשעבר אתה בטח יודע שלא דופקים פה על השולחנות.
שר במשרד הרווחה.
Itamar Ben-Gvir.
תוסיף קריאה שלישית, נא להוציא אותו.
Minister in the Minister in the Ministry of Social Affairs, Yoav Ben-Tzor, Minister of Economy and Industry, MK Nir Barkat, Minister of Construction and Housing, and Minister in the PMO, Rabbi Yitzchak Goldknopf, Minister of Defense, MK Yoav Gallant, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Avi Dichter, Minister in the PMO, Galit Distal Atbarian. A ministry by the name of Strategic Affairs will be established to be headed by our former ambassador in Washington, Ron Dermer. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Health, and Minister of the Interior, Aryeh Deriya. The Minister of the Periphery, which will now be called the Minister of the Development of the Negev of Gil and National Resilience, Yitzchak Wasserlof. Minister of Culture and Sport, Miki Zohar. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Eli Cohen. Minister of Tourism, Chaim Katz. Minister of Energy, Yisrael Katz. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, and currently Minister of Intelligence, Yariv Levin. The Minister of Religious Affairs, Michael Malkieli. Minister of Social Affairs, Yaakov Margi. Minister of Immigration, Ophir Sofer. Minister of National Emissions, Orit Struk. Minister of Environmental Protection, Idit Silman. Minister of the Treasury and an additional minister in the Ministry of Defense, who will be in charge of coordinating affairs in in Judea and Samaria, Bezalel Smotrich. Yoav Kish, Minister of Education. Minister of Communications, Shlomo Kari. Minister of Transportation and Road Safety, Miri Regev. Minister of Diaspora Affairs and Social Equality, Amichai Shikli. Thank you.
חברי הכנסת, נא להפסיק עם מחיאות הכפיים משני הצדדים.
השר המקשר
The minister who will be the liaison between the Knesset and the government, Yoav Kish. Thank you to the Prime Minister designate Benjamin Netanyahu. I'd like to call upon MK Yair Lapid, who is the head of the largest party that is not part of the coalition. Mr. Speaker, my dear fellow members of Knesset,
חברי הכנסת רוטמן, נא לשבת. נא לשמור על שקט. בבקשה, אדוני.
תודה רבה, אדוני היושב-ראש, חברי הכנסת, השבעת הממשלה.
The swearing in of the government is passing the baton, and we pass it on not with a quiet heart to the elected government. And at a moment like this, the Knesset and the citizens of Israel should be given an orderly report on the state of the nation. Out of respect for this situation, I'd like to give a report of what the previous government did, first led by Naftali Bennett, whom I'd like to thank, and then under me, in order to prevent attempts to rewrite history. It should be clear what the state of the state was when the previous government took over. Netanyahu just said that the first task is to halt the Iran from growing stronger, and I agree with that. Contrary to all the forecasts and prophecies of doom, our government managed to stop the re-signing of the deal with Iran. It involved complex diplomatic efforts, some under the radar, with the American government and Europe. The result is well known. The agreement was not signed. The sanctions on Iran remained in force and were expanded. The Revolutionary Guards were not removed from the lists of terror groups. The files in the International Atomic Agency were not closed. And we signed the historical Jerusalem Declaration that included agreement with the principle that Israel has the right to protect itself and to stop the Iranian nuclearization in any way Israel sees fit, and that included an American commitment to economic cooperation to an unprecedented extent. During our term, Israel carried out a long list of known and unknown actions to stop Iran from growing stronger. We increased the effort to weaken Iran's hold on Syria, and further than that, we planned and renewed security projects that were neglected to preserve and improve Israel's attack capabilities. Some of them were neglected, and we restored them to action. All this was done with an intense and sometimes decisive dialogue with the Americans, but also by strengthening Israel's position in the United States. We did not pay any price. We did not agree to allow an American consulate in Jerusalem. In East Jerusalem, we did not, of course, agree, contrary to some publications, to allow the Americans any veto over Israeli actions, and of course we did not allow any international investigations of IDF soldiers or officers. We continued to strengthen the Abraham Accords. We opened ambassadors and legations in the UAE and in Bahrain and Morocco. We continued talks with the Saudis to enable Israeli planes to fly over Saudi Arabia, to enable Israeli Arabs to fly directly to Mecca during the Hajj. And we also set the foundations for the full Saudi joining signing of the Abraham Accords, if the new government continues on the path that we have paved, then we will be able to reach full normalization with the Saudis within a not too long time. We opened the Negem Forum for the economy with Egypt, Morocco, Bahrain, and the United States. I held talks with the King of Jordan, and with the right diplomatic treatment, the Jordanians will join the forum too. We opened the IUT forum with India and the United States, which is already building economic projects throughout the Middle East and opening new markets to Israel. We renewed relations with Turkey. There is an ambassador in Ankara. We signed an aviation agreement with the Turks, and we have a joint economic commission. We have appointed 74 new ambassadors. We have rebuilt the national diplomacy system, especially digital. We fought successfully against the Fourth Durban Convention, an anti-Semitic convention, and we caused many countries to refuse to participate. We signed the Horizon Agreement with the EU. These are agreements that in recent years will cause Israeli science and innovation to move forward and improve our relations within Europe. We signed a historic marine agreement with Lebanon that ensures the security and energy interests of Israel in the north. We signed a strategic agreement, the first of its kind, with the UK, and we signed a free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates and with African states. In the security area, the past year and a half have been the quietest in the Gaza periphery for many years. As will be recalled, our government was sworn in immediately after the riots. And we, so that these events would not be repeated, we introduced a policy of zero tolerance on the southern border with Gaza. In August of this year, we set out on a campaign to fight the terror of the Islamic Jihad, one of the fastest and most effective and lethal campaigns. And the senior leadership of the Islamic Jihad was destroyed without Israel having a single fatality. And there was, in July, there was the campaign to lower the level of terror in the Palestinian Authority, and the IDF continues to do that work in Nablus, in Jenin, anywhere where there are attempts to harm Israel. After many years, we restored the policy of targeted assassinations of terrorist leaders. I would like to clarify that although we have heard a lot of unsubstantiated talk about this, the rules of engagement are clear to every IDF soldier. If someone wants to kill you, kill him first. Those are the rules. Despite all the threats and contrary to the past, we insisted on holding the flag parade in Jerusalem on its original route, and we held the Jerusalem Day celebrations, and we maintained the status quo on the Temple Mount, and a record number of Jews went up to the Temple Mount in the past year, and the month of Ramadan passed quietly. We raised the salary of soldiers to 50%. We introduced a program to pay for 50% of the tuition for anyone who has served in the IDF. I consider that an expression of national priorities, in that our government placed at the top of its priorities those who serve in the IDF, the young people who risk their lives to defend our lives and our borders. We passed the reform for soldiers suffering from PTSD, and I would like to especially commend MK Gantz because it was so important to him. The government managed to extract Israel from the corona crisis without a single closure. We were the first country in the world that's had booster shots. Health Minister Minister led this campaign very well, and I congratulate him. In the economic area, The Economist, the most important economic journal in the world, last week published that Israel is the fourth strongest economy in the world. A lot of credit goes to the outgoing finance minister Avigdor Lieberman, that for his responsible leadership. We managed to pass a budget for the first time in 3 years, and it included a number of historical reforms in energy, transportation, and industry, and also the pension age for women and parallel imports. I have to mention some figures. During the past year, from November to November, the state had a budget surplus of 3 billion shekels, and the revenues grew by 3.5%. Israel's exports grew by 21%, and in 2022 it will cross the $26 billion. And inflation is 3. Inflation is now 5.1. It's too high, but it's still much lower compared to the situation in Europe and the United States. The government has contended, like every other government in the past 15 years,
with
the cost of living, which has become very serious, and we introduced a number of reforms, like in agriculture, the parallel import, and introduced cheaper supermarket chains like Carrefour, and the Carrefour products are available everywhere, and they're much cheaper than similar products. And of course, the number one cause of the cost of living in the last 15 years, housing, led by Minister Elkin. The government doubled the number of transactions and led to a record number of building starts and the number of discounted apartments. And we see at the end of the first quarter of 2023, we'll see a drop in housing prices if the construction continues at the scope until now, and this decrease should continue. The first task, the prime task of the Israeli economy in coming years will be to bring as many people as possible into the workforce. Led by Orna Barbibai, the Minister of Economy, a reform was undertaken in 2021. 70,000 people graduated from vocational training, and in 2022 the number was even higher. The government increased the support for the LGBT community to a record high, and increased the support for women's organization and the fight against violence against women to new records. The government presented a national program to fight the climate crisis, similar to the most advanced countries in the world. We activated the 5-year plan for the Arab society in Israel. In the past year, It was budgeted at 5.5 billion shekels, and of course, the program to fight violence in Arab society, and it placed a great deal of pressure on criminals, and there's a great deal more that still needs to be done. I'd like to say something on a personal note. For me, the greatest achievement in the past year was that I was Prime Minister, but that we passed the law for people with disabilities. This week I met with the Director General of the Minister of Welfare, and I am sure that the next Minister, Margi, understands how important this law is, and that the families are waiting for it with bated breath. Those are the main things. We are giving over to you a state in a very good situation, with a strong economy, with improved deterrence, with an international status of the highest ever. Try not to destroy it. We're coming right back. Thank you very much.
You've just been listening to opposition leader, now outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid, speaking in the Knesset, ending his speech by saying, "We are giving over a state in a great position. Do not destroy it." Yair Lapid also saying that at a time like this, the swearing in of this new government is not coming off to a good start, and that he is not handing over the baton in good graces. He also gave an overview of what his government did, first led by Naftali Bennett, so that the new government won't, quote, rewrite history. In reference to Netanyahu's position on Iran, he said that his government actually stopped Iran in many ways by avoiding a return to the nuclear deal and making sure the IRGC was not taken off the designated terror list for the United States. Now we're going to list off some more key positions for you that Benjamin Netanyahu noted in alphabetical order in the new government. As we know, Benjamin Netanyahu will be the new Prime Minister, Amir Ohana, the Knesset Speaker, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, Yoav Gallant, the Defense Minister, Eli Cohen, the Foreign Minister, Aryeh Deri, the Interior and Health Minister, Yariv Levin, the Justice Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, the Finance Minister, and a minister position in the Defense Department, Yoav Kisk, the Education Minister, Chaim Katz, the Tourism Minister, Yoav Kisk, the Education Minister, Avi Dichter, the Agricultural and Rural Development Minister, Shlomo Karhi, the Communications Minister, Miri Regev, the Transportation Minister, Edith Silman, the Environmental Protections Minister, Miki Zohar, the Culture and Sports Minister, and Ophir Akunis, the Science and Technology Minister. Let's bring back in our panel now Ruth Wasserman Lande, a former member in the Knesset, and Ariel Kahana, the diplomatic correspondent at Israel Hayom. Ruth, I want to start with you. You just heard from the incoming Prime Minister and the outgoing Prime Minister, a colorful conversation, to put it kindly, in the Knesset. A lot of yelling, a lot of shouting, people being dragged out during Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. What was your take on both of those speeches?
Yelling in the Knesset, I wouldn't say, is a very unusual phenomenon. It usually happens. The opposition sees it as its, how should I put it, its obligation. Nonetheless, of course, everything is very sensitive. There's a lot of dichotomy in Israeli society, as I think portrayed by the two camps. I'm very much against saying the right wing and the left wing. It's a very wrong and very superficial take of the two camps. Yes, there's none of the left-wing parties in the current government, in the current coalition camp, but there are certainly right-wing parties in the opposition camp. And therefore, the dichotomy isn't quite clear-cut, but there is a lot of antagonism currently in Israeli society. It very much reminds one of the Republican and Democratic antagonism that has reached really unknown heights in the U.S. Perhaps this is somewhat of a good example, but not quite the same. We shall have to see how everything goes. I think that Eli Cohen being the foreign minister is certainly a surprise, not a name that was very much high on the list in terms of the anticipation for such a high-ranking position. And that leaves certain ministers or certain MKs in the Likud devoid of a very high-ranking position, which will raise the chances of them being against Netanyahu and perhaps causing him more problems from within.
Ariel, I want to get your take now. Netanyahu laying out 3 specific things in his plan to diminish Iran's nuclear capabilities, develop Israel's infrastructure, and a circle of peace, meaning expanding the relations with the Abraham Accords. What is your reaction to the 2 speeches you just heard?
So I think we heard what expected to hear from both of them, from Netanyahu and from Lapid. Lapid ended by saying, tried not to ruin what we left for you. We'll come back soon. I'm not sure he will come back soon. But talking about Eli Cohen, I think Eli Cohen, it was not surprising to me at all. Eli Cohen had part in renewing or building the ties between Israel and Sudan. He visited Sudan once or twice. And what is uniting, I would say, all of the Likud ministers, at least the seniors one, is being personally loyal to Netanyahu.
That's true.
Eli Cohen is going with Netanyahu hand to hand very strongly for years, and that's the reason. And he was very popular in the primaries as well. The same with Yoav Gallant. Now, Netanyahu, as you said, Hamda, made his goals by saying that he wants to reach a peace with Saudi and, of course, to stop Iran. The point is that those 2 points or goals are related, but are related as well to the United States. As long as America is seen here in the region, in the Middle East, as weak, as long as Biden is not cooperating with MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi, I can't see how Netanyahu reaches that goal. Actually, Netanyahu will have to upside down the American policy regarding Saudi. I can't see it happening from political reasons. Biden will not be able to do that. So Netanyahu will work hard about that, but at least for me, at the moment, it looks as very difficult.
Ruth, I want to ask you a question about the opposition. We didn't get a chance to touch on you. I want to first ask you about Benny Gantz. Why is he not joining this government? And do you think he would ever join this government if to him this is a huge problem? He has been quoted by saying that Netanyahu is now picking these ministers based on the size of their kippah, meaning how religious they are rather than their qualifications. So what do you think his position will now be?
I don't see Benny Gantz joining this current government. He said several occasions that he will not join Netanyahu based on the fact that he has forfeited his trust. He did join Netanyahu previously. I was in that government. In fact, I was an MK serving under Benny Gantz at that point when the Blue and White Party at the time, joined the government, serving on various on fronts in the Knesset. A lot of the promises made by Netanyahu to Benny Gantz, and particularly the most important promise, passing on the premiership to him when it was promised, was not kept, and therefore Benny Gantz has said he's no longer a reliable partner. I cannot trust him. He cannot be relied upon, and therefore I cannot join him because anything that he promises me will not be fulfilled. But also in terms of the value-oriented assessment of Benny Gantz, and here I speak not as a politician, but rather as somebody looking from the outside, there is a significant difference of value-oriented policy. Perhaps a little bit less Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, but rather in terms of Netanyahu's partners and the fact that he's going to lead certain policies that are very, very controversial in terms of the policies led by Benny Gantz. And particularly, I would say, the one most important thing that he has emphasized lately is the breaking up of the authorities in and within the Ministry of Defense, giving some of them the civil rights over Judea and Samaria to to somebody else other than the Minister of Defense, namely Smotrich, the Minister of Finance. And he says, and not only him, but many people, high-ranking people in the defense establishment, that this will hurt the defense establishment itself.
I want to ask you now, Ariel.
I want to say, if I may, I really disagree about that. I think the reform in the civil administration regarding Judea and Samaria is very smart and very necessary, not only for the Israelis, but for Palestinians who are living there as well.
Absolutely.
All right, because the point is, and people don't get it, that there are civilians, Jews and Arabs, who are living, it's 500,000 Jews today, right? Who are living under military. It doesn't make sense. And as someone who is living there, if we have a problem with our school, we are dependent on officers in the army. It doesn't make sense, right?
Well, I think it depends because the law, the legality, there has not been, the Israeli law has not been brought onto Judea and Samaria. And therefore, for those who do not know, there isn't a legal system that is the coherent legal system, not the Jordanian fully, not the Palestinian, nor the Israeli. And therefore, the military coordination office is really the giver and the taker of civilians, both Jewish and Palestinian, in Judea and Samaria area. But if you divide that or you take it out from the Ministry of Defense, there is a huge chance that the lack of coordination will bring that the Ministry of Defense and the defense establishment will forfeit from this pulling out, and this is the worry.
So the reality is that the lack of coordination is happening today. Actually, it's happening for 55 years. If you want to,
there is no lack of coordination because it is within the Ministry of Defense.
No. I'm sorry, but it's far from being accurate. The reality today is that if you want to have a new road that is necessary again for Arabs and for Jews as well. It's so complicated because you have to coordinate with the transportation ministry, the Israeli, and at the same time with the army.
And can you imagine that the military will not know about
the military will know,
which is a civilian thing, but it has repercussions and implications on the military agenda. And then there is an issue between the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Defense, making it even more difficult and more cumbersome for the civilians themselves, not to mention the defense.
Opposite will happen. It will be more coordinated and more sensible in a way that you don't need the involvement of a military officer to improve a new road or a new school.
Perhaps you don't need it in a utopic situation, and the utopic situation is not there in Judea and Samaria to say it lightly.
All right, but that's a political issue.
Given the complication and the complexity of the situation, having no legal system or legislation that is in place there that is coherent, you need one organization to take care of the coordination.
For a second. Let me ask you both about the Palestinian issue. We've got a few minutes left. How do you think this new government is going to handle the Palestinian issue? Previously, we spoke about Jordan saying they will have no choice but to intervene if the status quo is changed. The United States coming out heavily and saying they are against further West Bank annexation. How do you think the government is going to deal with the Palestinian issue and coordinate with the Palestinian Authority? Ben-Gvir did speak to the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, telling him it's important for Israel to be in coordination with them for the sake of the Palestinian people. But the Palestinian people don't really want that. What do you think?
So I don't think a lot is going to change regarding the Palestinians as government, at least in the coming 2 years when we have the democratic administration in America. There is no room for reforms or changing significantly the policy. Maybe we will see a little bit more construction. I believe the reform in the civil administration will do good for Palestinians and Israelis as well. But generally speaking, you will see no, I would say, diplomatic developments regarding this issue. Talking about Jordan is important because instability in Jordan might affect the region in general.
We're just looking at live images now outside the Knesset of a protest that has grown considerably since we last saw our reporter there, Alec Pollard. Ruth, what do you make of this protest right now?
A lot of people in the state of Israel feel worried, concerned that this incoming government will not represent them, will create a reality in which they will not have the rights and the circumstances which they enjoyed previously. They are concerned about issues pertaining to equal rights with the gay and lesbian community, about issues pertaining to the minorities, about freedoms and liberties in civil society. And this is the image that we see. There is a growing dichotomy, which did not begin, by the way, today because of this incoming government. This has been a growing dichotomy. One has to be fair and say within Israeli society, and yet it seems to have been even more cumbersome on the internal arena, given the diversity of opinions between this incoming government and the other camp, which, by the way, is not coherent either, but has differences of opinion in and within itself.
And Ariel, what do you make of this?
The opposition promised 1 million demonstrators. We see here a few thousands. Now, I mean, yeah, I don't give up on what they say. It's important, right? It's a position. The government always have to listen to everyone, but we still would have to remember, as I said in the beginning, it's a political demonstration. It's fair enough. All right.
We're going to cross now to I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman live for us inside the Knesset. Owen, we just heard speeches from the incoming and outgoing prime ministers, Benjamin Netanyahu and Lapid, respectively. What is the atmosphere there now?
Look, as I said before, Hamda, obviously in a day like this at the Israeli Knesset, lots of buzz, all kinds of media here, politicians walking around, everyone trying to say what they want about how this government is going to be playing out. We saw, all of us, how it played out inside the plenum, all of the interruptions that faced incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he went through his speech, and a different approach that, of course, Yair Lapid took. Obviously, as I said, a lot of excitement inside the building, as you mentioned, the protest outside, and of course, Hamda, this is just the beginning. We're hearing it in studio, we're seeing it on our screens, what lies ahead and the controversies that this government may well kick up over the coming days, weeks, and months. And of course, we should also mention the issue of the ministries and who will get which ministry. In some cases, Hamda, we learned only as Benjamin Netanyahu read the names and positions from the podium. One name that was not on the list, of course, Dani Danon, former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, senior Likud politician. We caught up with him literally, Hamda, on his way into the plenum. It had not been known what his position was going to be. Here's the conversation we had with him, again, literally on his way into the Knesset plenum for the swearing-in.
And I'm very happy today to see that we have a new government, finally. So as of now, I am not planning to be a minister, but I will support this government, and we will do good things for the people of Israel.
When did you find out you wouldn't be a minister?
So we're still speaking about this issue with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we will let you know once we will know what's happening.
What kind of ministry would you like?
Well, I will not do it here, even though I love I-24, but I'm committed to do good things for the people of Israel. I bring with me to the Knesset a lot of experience. I was in the government, and I will support this government in whatever position I will have today. I am committed to make sure that we keep the strength of our bond between our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. This is one of the priorities I have in this coming coalition, government, and Knesset. And I can assure my friends from all over the world that we will not allow any radical views to change the special bond we have.
And Owen, very quickly, we've got about a minute left. Talk to our viewers about what's expected today, what the rest of the ceremonial processes are, and when will officially Benjamin Netanyahu will be the prime minister.
Right. Well, Hamda, as we speak, each of the Knesset factions has its opportunity to go to the podium and speak. Those who are going into the coalition have less time. Those going to the opposition, more time. That will take a couple of hours. We will also have the election of the new Speaker of the Parliament, set to be Amir Ohana from the Likud, the candidate being put up by the coalition. At that point, there's going to be the vote about whether to seat the government or not. And at that point, of course, it's expected to pass. And once that happens, the actual swearing in, Benjamin Netanyahu, not for the first time, going up to that Knesset podium and taking the oath of office as Israel's prime minister, and then one at a time, each of the incoming ministers as well. Once that's done, a toast to the new Speaker of the Parliament, and onward, the government has to go and start its work.
I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman reporting live for us from Jerusalem. Thank you. I want to bring back in our panel Ruth Wasserman Lande, a former member in the Knesset, and Ariel Kahana. We've got about 30 seconds for each of you. Ruth, final thoughts.
What can I say? Inshallah, please God, and I believe in Him, Israel is an important beacon of light in the area and in general in the international arena. We need to be a cohesive society, and I truly hope, although I am concerned, but I truly hope that this government will be able to keep a society that is cohesive.
Ariel, 30 seconds.
So after 4 years, the crisis has ended. I think everybody wishes successes in new governments. They have a lot of challenges, internal and outside. And really, I join what Ruth said. Just let's hope they will, and pray they will succeed.
Our panel, Ruth Wasserman-Lande and Ariel Kahana, joining me in studio. Thank you so much. That's it for us here from this special edition from the I-24 News Desk on the swearing in of Israel's 37th government. Benjamin Netanyahu will officially become the prime minister after Israel's 5th election in just under 4 years. Now, he read off a list of his coalition partners as well as the new members of the government. Be sure to keep it right here on I-24 News for continued updates throughout the day in